What is abstinence-only sexual education? It is a form of sexual education that teaches students in school to just not have sex before marriage as a form of contraceptive, and it tends to omit the other forms, such as condoms and birth control. As of 2021, there are a total of 19 states that require and allow for abstinence-only education to be taught, not only during, but as a form of sexual education in schools. However, of these 19 states, 5 of them are in the highest percentage of teen pregnancy rates. Teaching abstinence only sexual education is shown to be ineffective and should be abolished as a form of sexual education. Abstinence only sexual education isn't being funded by the companies running the programs, instead, being funded using taxpayers' money from the government. In the article Funding for Abstinence Only Education in Adolescent Pregnancy Prevention, Does State's Ideology Affect Outcomes by Ashley Fox, she says, it is estimated that the federal government has spent nearly $2 billion in abstinence only funding since the 1990s. And that was the only form of government spending being used for sexual education before 2010, when Obama started funding teen pregnancy prevention programs. With all this funding being poured towards teaching abstinence only in schools, it has been shown to have no effect on teen pregnancy rates. In 2007, there was a 9-year congressionally mandated study that followed 4 abstinence-only programs. The results showed that teens in this abstinence-only programs had no difference in sexual behavior. The teens in these programs were no more likely to abstain from sexual activity than teens not enrolled in these programs. It was also shown that federal abstinence-only funding had no effect on adolescent birth rates overall, but displayed a perverse effect, increasing adolescent birth rates in conservative states. This is taxpayer money, and not all taxpayers are wanting to fund programs that are shown to have no sort of effect on teens, such as lowering adolescent pregnancy rates. Another reason abstinence only programs should be abolished is due to the amount of shaming as well as stereotyping used in these classes. In the article Sex Negative by Becca Andrews, she describes her experience of sitting on a teacher training session, watching a series of training videos about traditional views of marriages and families. She watched one that had a man asking a series of questions to an audience, such as, what is a mother's role in the family? What are her responsibilities? And the audience responses were to cook, clean, and do laundry. Then, when the audience was asked about the father's roles, the audience responded with pay bills and go to work. The man then proceeded to say that that is what a family is supposed to look like. Enforcing these stereotypes is dangerous, especially to kids. Learning about their bodies and exploring who they are going to develop into as adults. If kids hearing these stereotypes do not adhere to them, they can feel a sense of self-isolation. When they do not act in the way that is presented as normal, the isolation may lead to depression, and it can only get worse from there. Shaming is also a common method in these abstinence-only programs. In the article Shame Isn't an Education by Emily Newman, she describes several examples given in order to shame people who have multiple partners, such as each student spitting into a cup. Then the teacher asks if anyone would like to drink from the cup, and obviously no one wants to. This is seen as a symbol of someone who has had sex with multiple partners, and now they are dirty, and no one wants them. Newman gave many other examples that shame people who have had sex before marriage, as well as women for causing men to get too hot quickly, saying that women need to learn to work on avoiding that rather than teaching the men to have a bit of control. And finally, abstinence-only programs are notorious for spreading misinformation and or exaggerating certain facts to work in their favor. In a content review of abstinence-only curricula, 11 of 13 commonly used curricula contain misleading and false information, such as inaccurate information about condom and other contraceptive methods, effectiveness, the risk of sexual activity and risks of abortions. These programs giving false information to these students as a means of scaring them instead of simply giving them the proper facts and letting them decide what they want to do on their own. In the article, The Accuracy of Condom Information in 3 Selected Abstinence-Only Education Curricula by Allison Lean Jin and John S. Santelli, they identified errors found in abstinence-only education. It was found that the curricula do not explain differences between typical use and perfect use contraceptives, failure associated with condom use, and other inaccurately compare HIV transmission risk with pregnancy risk. Also, is explained within the article that there are several examples used to give the students being taught an understanding of condoms and the risk for HIV, as well as teen pregnancy. An analogy was used between the use of condoms and Russian roulette. The analogy was seen as inappropriate and problem for many reasons, such as it implies that HIV transmission is synonymous with a serious bullet wound and therefore causes imminent death. Also, the example ignores the fact that most sexual partners among teenagers are not HIV infected. The prevalence of HIV in the U.S. teenage population is relatively low. Being taught medically accurate information is a basic human right. However, these students are being robbed of it, for these programs to create their own narrative to teach these students about abstinence. Abstinence is often presented as a moral choice, but when these students are being taught that it should be their only choice to be able to avoid HIV/AIDS and pregnancy, rather than being taught about condoms and birth control, they are put in a position to be more likely to choose fewer safe options because they are not as educated as they should be. In conclusion, abstinence-only education is shown to be ineffective as a form of sexual education and should be abolished. It is far too expensive to continue to be worthwhile investment by the government, considering the results show there is no difference in behavior between teens who take it and teens who do not. The programs involve a lot of slut-shaming as well as stereotyping used as lessons, and these programs are notorious for spreading misinformation. Abstinence should be taught during sexual education. However, it should be taught alongside other forms of contraceptive and birth control methods to allow students to make their own choices of what is best for them.